Ade and Rama, thank you very much. Sorry, you have helped set the scene for our opening panel, which is entitled Transforming African Finance in Times of Crisis. So, with that, please put your hands together for our moderator and another African great journalist. He is CNN international correspondent. Please help me to welcome on stage Mr. Larry Madowo.
Thank you. I'm a little jealous that Ade is retiring with a full head of hair. I can't relate. Rama and I can't relate, but must be nice. You're getting 75% of the hairless Kenyan journalists on stage today. This is 75% of the supply. We're going to talk about the very important work of transforming finance in times of crisis. I think President Yasimbe and Sergio and Ben all kind of laid the foundation for that. Please help me welcome the panelists on stage. Mary Wangare Wamai, Group Executive Director at Equity Bank. Thank you. Please welcome to the stage as well Mohamed Lamin Bass, CEO of Sunu Group. Thank you. And please welcome back to the stage Sergio Pimenta, Vice President for Africa at the International Finance Corporation. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. Listen, you heard Ade's skepticism around crypto, and I saw the governor of the Central Bank of Kenya nodding very vigorously when Dr. Njoroge, when Ade was saying he doesn't trust some of that wahala, for lack of a better term. And the crypto winter, which is kind of turning into a crypto ice age at this point, with the recent collapse of the second largest crypto exchange, FTX. I won't even get into that. But I think from where you come from in different parts of the continent, you have record inflation, you have some of the worst performing currencies in the world, you have some protests around the cost of living, partly due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So there is crisis in this industry, without a doubt. And so I would like to start there by defining the problem. Mary, I'll start with you. What is the biggest crisis you're most concerned about?
Thank you, and good morning, all. I would say that the biggest crisis is having a population that cannot feed itself sufficiently, which cannot put a decent meal on the table. One of the others is, of course, failing businesses, and I think we've seen this as a result of the COVID crisis first, and then, of course, now we are also dealing with current crisis, and we have been told to expect a serious recession, not just in Africa, but globally. So I think we have to accept that that is what we have to deal with and look for solutions that work for that situation.
We'll get to those solutions in a moment, but for people who are not familiar with just how big Equity Bank Group is, you're the largest financial services group in East and Central Africa, I believe. Just explain that scale for us.
Yeah. Thank you. We have 20 million customers right now, spread across 7 countries in the East African region, including the Democratic Republic of Congo. And what we have done is to establish a financially inclusive model. And I would say that the breakthrough from equity, which has actually come from technical insolvency a few years ago, was when we realized that we had to serve all customers across the different segments and across the different income levels in a very inclusive manner. And we have spent a lot of time to understand what is it that these customers require, what products and services, how should they be delivered, because delivery at different levels is very different. We have to understand their unique challenges and provide solutions for them. And I think we are learning a lot from that experience.
All right. And Mohamed, Sunu is equally influential in the insurance market in this region. So again, as you define what the biggest crisis for you is the one you're most concerned about. I'd love also for you to talk about the scale of your operation here.
Ok, thank you. Je vais continuer en français. Donc, pour nous les...
We, the insurers, the most important crisis has to do with the climate crisis. As we speak today, last September, there were hurricanes in the United States, huge amounts of money, droughts, September. We cannot put a cost to it. If you are insurer or reinsurer, we have serious losses, $443 million for loss, Swiss Re, Munich K, they are $1.6 billion lost. And as far as we are concerned across the continent, it's important. They give us coverage. Given the important projects of industrialization we will be dealing with AFC, FTA, we want coverage to be able to cover these risks. Yes, we must admit that COVID crisis and the war in Ukraine has impact, and there are inflation and so on and so forth. But I believe that Africa had shown that it is resilient, and our economies, in spite of all this, we are not in recession, and there are opportunities for growth. These are opportunities.
You mentioned some high-level kind of headwinds facing this industry in your remarks earlier, but I wonder which is the biggest crisis what keeps you up at night?
Thank you, Larry. Look, I think many of the participants already mentioned quite of the big uncertainties that we are facing and challenges, whether it's COVID, food security, climate, and so on. But if there's one topic that I wanted to remind everyone is the importance of maintaining and creating employment. Africa has a large population, a young population, a lot of capacity for innovation, but those young Africans are coming to the market, the world market, the job market. We need to find right opportunities for them. And I think this is where, as financial institutions, we all have to think how we support the creation of a very strong private sector that can create that employment, right? This is really one of the topics that is keeping me awake at night.
And we went back because of the pandemic. We lost a lot more jobs in that 2-year period than usual. So we're sort of starting from the back banner here with unemployment across the continent.
No, that's correct, and particularly for women. Women lost more jobs in the pandemic than men, and the impact has been disproportional. And that's one of the areas that I think we should all focus on how we recreate the conditions for women to take their role in the society and in economic development, right? But when you look at the impact that the pandemic has had in Africa, there was, before the pandemic, Africa was in a trajectory of growth, very strong growth, one of the strongest growth in the world, actually, compared to the other regions. And I agree with Mohammed. It's true that now we are in a situation where it's a slowing down of that growth, maybe not a recession, things are maybe improving, but they need to improve faster. I think it is very important to reconnect with the trajectory of growth that there was pre-pandemic.
Are you looking at the global headwinds and the risk of contagion for Africa, even if a lot of agencies are not predicting a full-blown recession, but the prospects don't look good? Should we be concerned down here?
There are risks of contagion, but there are also, I think, very strong opportunities for Africa to find new development models focusing on the continent. And we talked earlier, we heard about trade within the continent. I think all the development of regional integration projects, not just on the political side, but on the private sector side, companies, banks, financial institutions, working at the regional level. I think that's where the opportunity is so that the continent can become much more resilient. And I see really real opportunities there.
All right, this talk, Lamine, of a global recession or downturn or whatever you want to call it, what is a likely impact on the insurance sector where you play in?
Mais comme je le disais tout à l'heure, pour nous, ça a été...
As I was saying, for us, we had much more opportunities because this crisis brought people to work differently. People were seeing new models, and this digital revolution that we are watching is an opportunity for us to reach to populations that we were unable to reach before. And we think that our future is the development of the mass market because first we were unable to reach them. Now we have increased our level of penetration at the level of insurance.
I think the success of the digital transformation across the continent is because of a gift we in Kenya gave the world of mobile money, and how that has gone across the world now is exceptional. Do you see that as one maybe potential silver lining in this dark time?
Yes, I would say definitely yes. Our experience has been that the uptake of mobile solutions, and when I talk mobile solutions, I'm talking about the ability to apply for a loan on mobile. I'm talking about the ability to pay for your shopping on mobile. I'm talking about the ability to send person-to-person transactions and cash on mobile, and a whole range of solutions. We are now thinking of what can you do to buy insurance on mobile, and of course investments in the stock markets, money markets, and all that. And what we have seen is that, if I give an example, right now 95% of all the transactions that are done in equity today are done on mobile and other digital channels. So what that tells us is that the uptake is very, very high. And what we are also finding is that the customers who have signed up and who are active on these channels are loving the channels. And that is because they provide extra convenience, they provide extra accessibility. What we set out to do in equity is actually to transform the bank as we know it from where you go. Because before you had to go to the bank and enter a branch or go to the ATM. And we have converted that into the place or the thing you do on your phone or your other devices. It is something you do, not a place you go. And what that has meant is that we are supporting lifestyles, because I can do my transactions when I'm wherever, in my house, on the streets, wherever I remember I need to pay so and so, I send the money. Or I go shopping, I remember I needed to do this, and I'm able to use my gadget. It's a self-service channel. So it's also very cheap, and it's very affordable for the institution. And that explains why we have been able to create a lot of efficiency and very low cost-to-income ratios in equity by doing that. One other, if you allow me, one other exciting thing that we have discovered is that most of our customers are doing their borrowing at 4 a.m. in the morning, 4 a.m. And we are trying to understand why. Why is that scenario?
Everybody has a financial crisis at 4 in the morning. They need money urgently before sunrise.
No. It's because a lot of them are going to do their trade in the morning very early. You know the markets, and I can talk about Kenya and Uganda and the East African region because I know it. A lot of the markets open at around 5 a.m. So I make a decision. Today I'm going to sell tomatoes. So I go to the bank, and going to the bank is on my phone. And I apply for my $20 or $200. That's 20,000 if it's in Kenya shillings. And I go to the market and buy what I need to sell for that day. At the end of the day, I repay the bank its money and keep my profit. So that has been very revolutionary, I must say. Yeah.
All right. So that's the view from banking. I also want to talk about the view from insurance, and especially coming back from the shocks of COVID-19. I mean, how far can the insurance industry in Africa go in terms of integration?
Alors, ce qui se passe aujourd'hui, c'est que
What is happening today is that insurers are out of their comfort zone. You have French-speaking insurers going to the English-speaking zones and vice versa. Today, the greatest responsibility of insurance, we are collecting funds and we are helping each and everyone. Actually, we don't have so much liquidity. That's why we hail the initiative of the Stock Market Association, giving tools to have access to 7 stock market together, but our regulations are not helping us because of our localization principle, because the funds take, that we take from a country must be invested in that country. So if I take money in a country, I try to put it in Cote d'Ivoire, it will be very difficult. Whereas in my stock market, transactions are not enough. Now, regulators must go in front and help us come out of our comfort zone. We have hope because regulators are conscious of that porous aspect nature of our various borders, and they want to help. We have conversion point, and they are helping us to authorize Nigerian investors to make transactions in Cote d'Ivoire and vice versa. Again, we have the CMA zone having 14 French-speaking countries, having something very unique is that they have the same currency, that is France CFA. They have the same regulator in insurance, and we agree that the 14 countries will come together and have the same regulator. In West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Liberia, Sierra Leone, the regulators created an association and they are discussing. So we have various regulators in regions, and the next step, I think, to take profit of AFCFTA is that all of them have convergence point, and we can operate all together.
Something that I'm always curious about is how come insurance penetration, not just in this region, but across the African continent, is still so low?
Oui, c'est
Yes, it is very low because first, how to educate people on the importance of insurance. That's the first aspect, and the second aspect is how to access these people. First, we were unable to have access to them. We were having agencies and people that are moving from point A to point B. So the level of penetration, the rate of penetration is very low. Now, if having the self-care that we are creating in various industries, we are going to have a very high growth ratio. And now, bringing together the bank and the insurance helps that through the banking network we are able to commercialize our products, and it helps to accelerate the penetration of insurance.
Perspective in terms of financial inclusion, Sergio, what is holding back the wider adoption of financial technology, especially for underserved populations?
So I think some of the topics that were mentioned before are quite right in terms of consistency of regulation or simplification of regulations that would allow for a better access to technology. I think there's a lot of innovation coming out in Africa, and also we have to think how we finance that innovation. So how much are we all ready as development partners, as commercial banks, as financial partners to support that innovation? And this is an area that we have all to focus on. I think, for instance, on the IFC side, since the pandemic, we've been doing quite a lot, looking at the changes that we see in the economy, changes in the way people spend their money, invest, and so on. We have supported mobile banking. We've supported Wave. We've supported Orange Bank, others in what they're doing. And I think that we also have done a lot on our advisory work in terms of supporting banks adjust to a more digital economy. And that, I think, is what we can all do more.
We have a panel tomorrow on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which is obviously an audacious plan to build a free trade area covering the entire continent. And I know you do a lot of work around trade finance and facilitating kind of financial instruments necessary to make sure that some of the topics we've been talking about are possible. So what do we need to ensure that robust trade on the continent in terms of in the face of all these crises we were talking about?
Honestly, I think this is one of the biggest opportunities the continent has, and we do need to do more. When we look at trade, I mean, trade with the pandemic, trade has gone down around the world by 15%. In Africa, it went down only 6%. So it has gone down, but less than the rest of the continent, the rest of the world. So we have to invert that curve. We have now to continue helping the trade grow, and in particular, trade within Africa. Today, for trade, you need trade finance. And only 40% of trade in Africa is financed by banks. So there's a lot that could be done. There's opportunity to do more. I thought it was very interesting, the exchange earlier about what is needed to develop this. And I fully agree with this notion of building trust, building logistics, building systems, so that in Africa we do look at what can be done between one part of Africa and the other, and not just among neighboring countries, right? So really have a continent-wide approach. A lot can be done. Technology can help. It's obvious that new technologies are really bringing a lot of new opportunities in that space. So there's a lot that we can do, and as development partners, we are really stepping up on that front, and I think it's very important.
All right, Mary, I want to pick up on something Rama asked Adeyemi before about crypto. And as a major bank like you, do you see any opportunity there? And I'm fully aware that your governor is sitting there, and so what you can say is limited, but try anyway.
Yeah. I was hoping, I don't get that, but I think Ade captured it very well. We believe that this opportunity, and we cannot ignore technology. And I know my governor is listening. He's seated right next to me. We cannot ignore technology. I think we've learned tough lessons, even when it comes to the mobile and banking convergence. We've learned a few lessons. But I think what is important is to deal with the risk aspects of it, the technology. Do we have the technology? But more importantly is the education of our customers, because I think we have learned a lot in terms of educating customers, even in very basic issues, like even the way they are doing farming. One of the discoveries that we have right now is that the peasant farmer can actually carry out their farming activities in a commercially sustainable way. And the way we have done that is just exposing them to education on what inputs to use, what to actually grow in their location and climate and soils and all that, and it has made a tremendous difference. So I don't see that this one is any different, because we're actually dealing with day-to-day issues that affect our ordinary customer on a day-to-day. We have seen the same in small and medium enterprise and micro enterprises. We are just taking them through a 13-week program of training. We are able to have better managed businesses. We are able to grow, and when you have better managed businesses, they create a better lending or borrowing history, and you're able to give them more money to grow their businesses. They employ more people, and that deals with the issue raised by Sergio, So we need to understand where these innovations can take us, and be able, of course, to ring-fence that with the right regulation, with the right risk mitigation, either systems or processes or whatever, so that we are also able to protect the consumers of these products and services. But I think we'll soon get there, yeah.
A very diplomatic answer, as diplomatic as possible, as humanly possible. Mohammed, where do you see opportunity, and I don't know if it's on the blockchain to transform insurance or some other place, in the face of all these crises, what is something that you're excited about, you think is going to transform your business and the industry across the continent?
Oui, c'est clair que
Yes, it's clear that today, when I take the case of insurance, that we are traditional, we're very classic. We went to the banks, and with the fintech, we have a clear ecosystem to help in accessing and offering to our various population insurance coverage and financial opportunities. And today we have a lot of discussions, and we are investing in fintech to master these kind of topics. And once more, the confidence is something very important. Technology is a tool, but I think confidence is what we can put in that tools.
Energy transition, and we just had COP27 wrap up, and you saw countries, many of them in Africa, make a big fuss about loss and damage and whether the financing is coming for that. But I want to talk a different aspect of that, Sergio, about challenges of financing Africa's sustainable transition and where you see it from the IFC perspective.
So, thank you. I think on the energy transition, I think we have to be very realistic and pragmatic on how we do it. And one of the aspects that we need is we need long-term finance, we need green finance. And when we look at how this new assets, this new class of assets that has been developed worldwide, how much has been developed in Africa, there's still a big lag, right? And there's two areas where we can work on. One is working on the regulations, and we've been supporting some of the regulators. We've done it in Ghana, I mentioned it earlier, we've done it in other countries, in terms of helping the regulators to define how this class of assets can operate in Africa. And I think there's also very good opportunities to look at this on a continent-wise basis, right? These standards can be very much international, following best practice, and can be deployed. And then, of course, there's the financing part, and helping mobilize funding that can be then deployed on a long-term basis to finance green projects. And we've financed some of the first green bonds on the continent. We've been helping launching them. And that is going to be very important, because then you have the financing that is needed so that you can do a transition that is a wise one. And then in terms of the projects that we are financing, I mean, it was mentioned earlier, there is of course, gas projects as a transition fuel. This is something that IFC has been supporting. But we, of course, also focus a lot on renewable energies. And this is one of the areas that we've been, including at COP, very vocal about what we can do.
I've heard a lot about regulators during this conversation. And I want to ask these two who work in insurance and in banking specifically. Sometimes I'm not in banking or insurance, but I just get the sense that regulators tend to be overly cautious to the extent of stifling innovation. Blink twice if you agree, Mohammed and, and Mary. I wonder, you talked about the need for integration of insurance regulators across Africa, Mohammed, as this is important to build on that penetration that's so necessary so the more people have access to these services. What's your general comment on the regulation landscape, considering you work across multiple geographies and jurisdictions and laws and regulations?
Ok, mon boss n'est pas là, mais je peux parler quand même. Non, je pense que les...
My boss is not around, but I think I can answer. Regulators are very open. And I think, Amir said it, we need to sit together and discuss. They are like us, they have a vision to develop Africa, and they have constraints. But when we discuss with them, we explain our constraints, they can help us go further. And the experience in the CIMAZO has proven that we've succeeded in pushing the lines by explaining our arguments, and I think it bore fruits. And I think that is very important, sit together and discuss with one another because they are open. Second thing that I want to add is that to face these crises in Africa, of course, we need to have local reinsurers that are powerful, giving us capacities to cover emerging risks and investment in the framework of AFCFTA. We need also to address the volatility question in terms of currencies, and we've seen that currencies have dropped a lot, and it has impact for us. Another important aspect, we are insurers, we are collectors of savings, and we need liquid assets to address the various issues. And also as insurers, we need industrialization to accelerate for us to produce locally, and our costs may be low.
And you're probably in some countries which have some of the worst performing currencies in the world, and is that something you're like, okay, hopefully this stabilizes and we can go back to normal, or do you begin to make alternative arrangements?
Non, en fait, c'est vrai que les...
Actually, it's true that currencies in these countries, for instance, when I talk about Ghana, they are very performant countries. They are very dynamic, and the growth rate in Ghana is 15% per year. But because of the volatility of the currency, the figures in dollars and euro are lower.
Later question, and whether you feel sometimes the regulators are overzealous and they stifle innovation, even during the crisis.
Yeah, thank you. Let me say, and I can say this without blinking, that our regulators have been very supportive. Of course, it requires, as my colleague here has said, a lot of engagement because we are all learning. Let me give an example. When we wanted to establish agency banking, the regulator rejected it twice, and that was several years before my current governor came in. And because they could not understand how a bank can offer financial and banking services outside the normal banking hall that we all knew that time. So we had to do a lot of homework. And what we had to do was to actually do a pilot of agency banking, but through a social payments program, nothing to do with banking. And we took the data to them and showed them we have been able to pay over 4 million beneficiaries of social payments in collaboration with our government and WFP and a few other institutions without a single fraud happening. And we asked them then, okay, so why can we not do the same for banking transactions, deposits, and cash withdrawals? And we got the approval on the third application. So I think that is what we need to do because we are all learning. Another thing we also had to convince the regulators and show them is how to do KYC, know your customer, on a farmer seated in a village in a part of Kenya or Uganda or wherever. And we told them we could do limited KYC. And those questions are also coming up now with issues like AML, how to treat some of the transactions and all that. But with that engagement and the need to understand that to really properly do financial inclusion, we also need to understand how our people go about their day-to-day businesses. And I must say also that this year, we managed to get an insurance license, of course, from the insurance regulator in Kenya, with no objection and approval from our central bank. And the questions they were asking was questions like, how do you create the Chinese walls between the insurance business, and how do you mitigate? Because the customers on the banking side will also be the customers on the insurance side. How do you create those Chinese walls just to make sure that all the customers are protected and you're not exposing them to new risks? The moment we were able to convince them that we have been able to think about proper structures,
Right.
proper processes, we were actually able to get the licenses. We are now discussing fintech licensing.
Okay.
That is the debate on the table. And I'm sure we are going to get a way out of it and we'll have an understanding.
Right,
Thank you.
Sergio, I want to give you the last word for the professionals in the financial industry on the continent here to deal with the clouds are gathering, the storm is building, or to use a more appropriate term, winter is coming. So how do they get a parachute to prepare to navigate these difficult times?
I think difficult times are times also of opportunities. And it's important to look at what can be seized at this moment. And it's the moment to also change. I think we're all much more open to change when the context is more difficult. And the opportunities are there. I think the future of this continent is bright. So we just need to go and seize that.
Final word, Mohammed, real quick.
Thank you. Non, je pense que nous avons des...
I think that we have good opportunities and we have a very resilient continent. It is important to bring people together in this context, and Jeune Africa has organized this. Thank you.
10 seconds, Mary.
Yeah, thank you. I think all I would say is that let's also look at our business models, because if our business models are excluding over 90% of the population, then I don't think we are going to get very far as institutions, and then we get solutions to deal with the current problems.
All right,
Thank you.
that is a great place to wrap it up. Please give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much. It's been a great audience.